morning, everyone. This is Michele Hughes from Ageless and Timeless. Today, I have a wonderful guest named Jim LaValle. And those of you who know me and know my podcast for the last 5 years know that I'm a very avid believer in the American Academy of Anti-Aging. And that is the organization that was founded, I think, 25 years ago by Dr. Goldman and Dr. Klatz. And Dr. Goldman has actually been a guest on our podcast. So we've been friends and acquaintances for all those years. And he has introduced me to many wonderful podcast guests, including our guest today, Jim LaValle, who is on the advisory board for for A4M, which is abbreviated to be called American Academy of Anti-Aging, or A4M. And he's also the head of I think it's, Jim, are you the head of education for A4M?
I'm the academic co-chair for A4M, and I also chair their International Peptide Society.
Oh, boy. Okay, well, this is just giving us more meat on the bone to talk about today. But so he, in that capacity, Jim, what are your responsibilities?
Well, I probably educate maybe 3 times more than any other instructor there. So I have to develop curriculum, bring in new and cutting edge information that our learners can take home on Monday and apply in their various types of practices. And then, be on the lookout for new and exciting therapies that are, what I would say safely on the leading edge, right? Mm-hmm. And in addition to that, I get on stage a whole bunch.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, one weekend I was trying to reach you. You were 30 hours teaching at A4M. 30 hours in one weekend. That's pretty.
Well, I feel blessed that they think I can contribute that much. So it's fun. It's a lot of fun.
So tell me, how many years have you been doing that?
With A4M, probably 20 plus. Obviously, I've been in this field I turned 64, literally for 40 years now.
Right, 40 years. Wow. So tell us what the differences are of the curriculum today, and compare that to the curriculum that you started with. So in other words, what has happened in those years that you've been an educator?
Well, I think there's just so much more understanding about the process of how do we stay well. When in the early days, it was like, hey, hormones, right? If you get your hormones right and your growth hormone right, that's going to take care of it, right? And then we progressed to this systems biology thought process over the last 40 years, and which is very relevant today, which is, all of our body systems are connected. And the more they're working in harmony, the slower we're going to create oxidative stress and metabolic inflammation, known as metaflammation, which leads to aging. So I think what's happened is we've created a much more deeper understanding at the cellular level of what needs to change. Mm-hmm. I will say the one thing that hasn't changed is that people need to take responsibility for doing the basics correctly. Mm-hmm. A lot of times people, I'll see practitioners get enamored with, I'm testing DNA methylation. That's great, but what's the person's blood sugar? Mm-hmm. What are their stress hormones like? Mm-hmm. Are they showing signs of oxidative stress? So I think that the constant thing I've seen over 40 years is you got to build a great foundation. Then all this new exciting things that we're learning in relationship to senescent cells and autophagy, how our body cleans itself up, and how can we induce that? That all gets layered right on top. Right? You got to get those foundations down. So that's what I would say be the biggest shift. Okay. And obviously the advent of peptide therapies coming into vogue the last 10 years and developing all of those courses. Right. That was it.
The interesting thing is, because you and I have been, I've been a member, longer than I even want to admit, but I was there at the very beginning, not when they were in the garage, so to speak, starting to conceptualize, but after it became a real organization. Right. And what I was thinking about is a lot of these doctors could be very elitist, at least back then. I think today they've become much more democratized, but you being a clinical pharmacist, very, and a clinical nutritionist, both, right?
Right.
So you managed to gain this credibility and position in an organization that by nature is made up of a lot of people who don't get me wrong, I'm not denigrating, but many of them are, believers that if you're not a doctor, you don't have anything to teach them. And yet here you are, the one that's taught them more than anybody. And your background is not as a medical doctor. So how do you explain that?
I don't know. Maybe I just got a charming personality.
Well, you are a gentleman. I can tell that. You love to communicate. You love.
Yeah. No, I think honestly, I think that when I went through pharmacy school, we had to learn every body system, all of the pathology, every drug. We had to learn how to compound. The college I went to, I had to learn botanical medicine.
Right.
So we took pharmacognosy, and then I was fortunate enough to teach at the School of Medicine and the School of Pharmacy for 18 years at the University of Cincinnati. And I think when doctors see that, I've taught academically in, medical school environments, that gains a lot of respect. And then, of course, my clinics were in Ohio. I always talk to docs. I work with physicians all the time. My clinic in Ohio, 3 physicians on my staff. We're always collaborating. So the reality is, I hope I put the energy off, is that we all have something to contribute.
Right.
That if we're talking about a receptor in the body and what can influence it, right. I think a pharmacist is as good as anybody because we study receptors more than anybody.
Right.
And then, but I don't get up there and try to tell them how to do a surgery. I'm
right.
not worried about trying to tell them how to do a physical. Right. I'm up there trying to teach them about the biochemistry of the body, what nutrients influence it, what type of drugs influence it, how they can apply that in their practice. And I think the last thing is, I'm really never too busy to answer a question. So when people come up to me or stop me, I always make sure that I make time for them because, that's what they're there for. They're there to learn, and anything I can do to help them, that's great.
Yeah, you actually, I've watched some of your lectures, and you make it fun actually, and that's a pretty daunting task when you're talking about something as serious as one's body, one's health, and you can make it into something that is very believable, understandable, and even a little bit entertaining. So I want to give you a kudos for that, because even another lay person watching you is fascinated. What would you say is your favorite lecture that you're doing today? Not
my favorite lecture today is all about the metabolic inflammation and its global impact on your body. How the concept of we build this model of not being resilient. So whether I'm working with special forces folks or first responders or people that are professional athletes or just everyday folks that are pushing hard, we all come to a breaking point. And then how does the body begin to unravel? What are the paths that start to crumble and then lead to chronic illness, right? So whether that's, environmental burdens that trigger, or mold exposures that trigger, or not enough sleep, too much stress, not eating right, micronutrient depletion, vectors, viruses, whatever. But how does our body take us away from the vitality we deserve and the homeostasis and health we deserve as we age, right? We're all going to die. I'm like, I just want to look fantastic when I get put in my casket. I want people going, wow, that is one good looking 90-year-old.
Right. Yeah. Or maybe 120-year-old, because
I'll take that too. I'll take that too.
As long as you're still vital, right?
That's right.
I'm with you on that one. So let's dive into that, the favorite speech, and really get into more of the details of what you are dissecting for people so that they understand how to be vital for every moment of their lives. Today's podcast is brought to you by Water and Wellness. Water and Wellness is one of the best companies to find purified water. They have a countertop system that I use, and I travel with it all the time. So I would highly recommend you look at that. If you use the Ageless code, you'll get a 10% discount. waterandwellness.com/pages/Ageless and Timeless. That's how you can order to get the discount. So visit waterandwellness.com or call 877-296-6880 to learn how to take control of your drinking water and learn about all those natural additives to optimize your health and longevity.
Sure. We can do that. I actually could pull up a slide that goes over it if you want to do it.
Love that. I know we talked about that and I asked you, so thank you for remembering. Yes, please do that. And we're talking now about the metabolic code. Is that
this is the first step is just how do we get there? And then I'll show people, I can show you how we develop the metabolic code. So this is kind of the model of metabolic inflammation. So if you look at the top, it says you get damaged cell debris, irritant chemicals, pathogens, or intrinsic cell defects, meaning your genetics, you get a bug, you get exposed to mercury, something causes you to trigger inflammation in your body, and inflammation is generated in order to correct it. Right. So I'm creating inflammation to correct the problem.
Right.
And then once the problem's eliminated, you're supposed to switch off the inflammation.
Right.
And then you go back to healing, or what I call homeostasis.
Right.
The problem is that when we get stuck in the red, I've got chronic exposure. I didn't get rid of the mercury. I'm under chronic stress. I'm not sleeping good. I have apnea. I'm crashing midday. I've ruined my cortisol curve. Whatever the reason, these are the things that start to happen. One thing that was not mentioned on this graphic, you start to make bad actor lipids. So you get people making more oxidized cholesterol and bad actor lipoproteins that lead you towards more risk of heart disease. The next one is you start to lose muscle. So if you look here, sarcopenia, you start to lose your muscle, and muscle is the currency of aging. The more you can hold on to your muscle as you age, the better you're going to age. So as you create inflammation, you lose muscle. As you create inflammation, you start to see iron stores that are adequate in most cases, but people don't make enough ferritin. Ferritin helps you to make ferroportin. Ferroportin helps you to make erythropoietin, which is going to make you be able to oxygenate your tissues better. But when you're metabolically chronically inflamed, you don't make ferritin from your iron. So you'll lose that.
And what's the normal ferritin level for a blood result?
Yeah, it'd be great if it was 100. Would love it to be 100, but it should be minimum of 75. And that's classic. That's like the number that even conventional medicine says, hey, if you're under 75, probably need to replace some iron. But the problem is you may have adequate iron, but you just can't convert it to ferritin because you're chronically inflamed. The next big one, and obviously this is big for a lot of reasons, 1 in 2 people in our country is either insulin resistant or diabetic. When you make more inflammatory compounds, you turn on TNF alpha, which is an inflammatory compound. You turn on toll receptor 4, you turn on interleukin 6. What's the net result of those inflammatory cytokines doing that? Your insulin receptors don't work well. So now what happens is your glucose goes up and your insulin goes up. Insulin is the most inflammatory compound your body makes. It's needed. It's essential. When it's too much, you gain fat. You start to put more marbling in your muscles. So instead of you being horse meat, you're A5 Wagyu, right? Meaning you got a lot of fat in that muscle. And then the next piece that happens is you start to lose bone because you don't remodel bone. So we've got an epidemic of people with osteoporosis and osteopenia. It's not just women anymore. We've got men as well. In addition to that, we've got the next issues are neurogenesis. So I'm decreasing the ability of me to renew my neurons.
But before you go on to that, let's just stop for a second. The glucose norm should be what?
I like to tell people between 75 and 84.
Good. Okay.
All right.
And
And then if it for every point above 90,
yeah,
it's a 9% risk of being a person with diabetes. If you look at the latest study, the
yeah,
previous Kaiser study was 6 points for every point over 84. So if you have a 95 blood sugar, you have a
yeah.
60% risk of being a person with diabetes.
And what about the insulin? That should be under 5 or 5 or
I
under?
love insulin being 5 or less.
Yeah. Okay. So I want people to know these things because, if they've done their blood work, they can check against their results and know what work they have to do. So, okay.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Super important about getting glucose and insulin right. Number one thing that's going to age you and kill you quicker, because all people with bad glucose regulation end up with heart disease. So diabetics, pre-diabetics always end up with heart disease.
And the A1C, that score should be what?
If it's 5.3 or less, I'm happy. The closer it is to 5, the better, but I'll take 5.3.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
All right.
So the next thing that happens, everybody now is complaining of being foggy headed, pushing a thought through jello. It's because as you're chronically inflamed, you upregulate your microglial cells in your brain, and that means you're going to start to destroy your neurons. You literally, when the glial cells activate, you burst with oxidative stress. It goes and damages the neurons. The neurons break down. As they break down, they're releasing compounds that go back to turn on the microglial cells. And it's this vicious cycle of neuronal destruction. Mm-hmm. And so neurogenesis has to be protected if you want to live long. The very last piece to this puzzle is, of course, mitochondrial biogenesis goes down. And why is that important? Your mitochondria are the powerhouses of every cell in your body. And when
which there are trillions, right, Jim?
Exactly. You got to have it. And here's the thing, when people got sick, it's interesting. When we talk about COVID, so when people got COVID, what we're finding out now, for example, people end up with diabetes and insulin resistance. Mm. And it's interesting because it follows this model where you got a vector, the inflammation didn't get resolved, and now you have insulin resistance. They have mitochondrial deficiencies. There's a bunch of papers published on that's why long haulers stay so fatigued, because they can't restore their mitochondria. And I'm just using COVID as an example, as a vector. It happens. This can happen due to working out too hard. Like I've got, obviously, as the chief science officer for Lifetime, I review a lot of people's information, and of course I work with pro athletes and teams in all 5 major league sports, as well as top bodybuilders in the world, literally. So it's not just the person that's sickly that this happens to. You can overtrain yourself into it. You can overfast yourself into it. And that can create this. So anyway, this sets up that process. And I just want to show you just how this progresses, right? So the next thing that happens, as you have chronic inflammation, your gut lining over here is velvety smooth. But as you have chronic inflammation, you get gut permeability, or otherwise known as leaky gut. And this is an electron microscopy of a human gut, right? This is the picture. It really does get leaky. And these are the cilia of your brush border cell of your intestine. 1 cell layer thick protects the lining of your intestine and the contents of your intestine from your bloodstream. And so when this isn't good, you start to create problems. Now let's progress it. Oh my gosh, when I get bad bugs and my gut gets leaky and I release a lot of this lipopolysaccharide, bugs are dying in my gut, I release the lipopolysaccharide. Lipopolysaccharide floats around in your body and attaches to every tissue in your body and triggers inflammation signaling. And that's why when I talked about the progression at A4M, it's this understanding of, where do things start? Where is the biggest problem? And for the longest time, you go get a very big lab. I'm sure you've seen this, Michele. You got this stack of labs like this, and the doc's writing notes on it, like, hey, this needs to be better with an up arrow. This needs to be better. Oh, this is a smiley face. This is an unhappy face, right?
Right.
But it's all manual. What we did, just to kind of go through that, is we went and developed the metabolic code pathway, which is metabotyping people. So what we did was we created networks. So one network talks to another network, talks to another network. Why did we do it? To make it simple for people to understand all of the various chemistries that are going on in your body. So if you notice, adrenal, thyroid, pancreas is the relationship between cortisol, insulin, and thyroid hormone. And then you have gut, immune, brain. The gut's connected to the brain through the enteric nervous system. And either the gut or the brain can influence the immune system, which then influences that relationship. And then these could stack on each other. If I'm under a lot of stress, triad 1, I could get a leaky gut. So the whole purpose of what we did was to try to make it easier to understand the complex nature. There's 40,000 algorithms behind this that looks at people's labs, looks at their symptoms, looks at their biometrics, and then takes all that data and places it and accelerates it into these 5 buckets. And the net result of that is it ranks them from highest score to lowest score. And the highest score, this is the metaflammation index. Okay. And so it only makes sense because you know what happens. People go in, and one reason I did this is a lot of the docs I was teaching at A4M to ask me to do it. I am not a tech guy. I mean, I had to write all these algorithms, and I would just, it took a long time to put this together. Mm-hmm. But this is actually being taught at George Washington School of Medicine. 14 weeks of their integrative master's program is all on our approach to metabolic physiology, and so that which only I think we're the only program that's taught in a medical school in an advanced degree program. So the point to this is if you target the things that are the most messed up in a person, typically they're going to start to feel better. And if we can get somebody to start to feel better, and my clinic in Ohio saw 300 to 400 people a week doing all personalized medicine. All right. And the biggest thing I found is if I can get them feeling better in the first 4 weeks, I got a good chance that they're going to stick with me.
So what do you find is the most common complaint and difficulty people have? I mean, I'm pretty sure I know what the answer is, but I want you to tell us.
Oh, by far, people are tired, overweight, and can't think clear.
Yeah.
They can't break through their weight loss, which is the miracle of GLP-1s, right? If you use them responsibly, change people's diets, get them to exercise, maybe use like a secretagogue like sermorelin that helps release your own growth hormone to keep you lean while you're losing weight. I think they're fantastic, but a lot of people end up not being able to lose weight. They diet, they exercise, and not a pound comes off. And that's because their chemistry is so ground into this metabolic inflammation model. So it's glucose, cortisol, their gut's permeable. So they've, a little candida, they're gassy, they're bloated. They feel tired after they eat. And then after that, it's kind of like, well, are you at the age where your hormones are starting to fail? Are your hormones out of balance? Are you maybe a young person whose hormones are already starting to fail? I mean, I have a lot of young men with sub 300 testosterones nowadays, which I never used to see that, So I think that, the net of this, and this is how this model worked. I thought I'd just show it to you.
Oh, it's so valuable.
So this is a 58-year-old executive, chief wellness officer for a Fortune 50 company. He has self-reported fatigue. He has no medication or supplements. And he's not overweight. All right. So what did we do? We looked at his chemistry, and he has a flattened cortisol curve, And it turns out when you're no longer making a circadian rhythm of cortisol up in the morning, down at noon, down at 4, really low at bedtime to kick in your melatonin, when you lose that pattern, you're at a 333% increased risk of heart disease, treatment-resistant depression, and neurodegenerative disorders.
Well, that just to stop that for a moment, that is something that is so important for people to understand, because stress is the greatest. They say it's the greatest killer, right? But people take that and it's just a euphemism after a while, because they don't know how to really make a difference with that statement of truth. But you just said something that is just mind-boggling. 333% chance of mortality if you do not get it under control. So the next question obviously is, how do you do that?
Well, I mean, so I'll do that in light of everything going on with him, right? Because that's how we want to, kind of think of this from a systems biology approach. Obviously, he's burned himself out. He's no longer producing enough cortisol. I don't like using the term adrenal fatigue because it's a marketing term. It's not a real term. More like, maybe it's adrenal failure or hypocortisolism. But the bottom line is he's crashed his cortisol. His blood sugar is up. So he went through a period of time where his cortisol was up. And now he has trained his body to really need glucose. So now he's insulin resistant. His magnesium pools are suboptimal, and you need magnesium for managing stress and managing your glucose. So then let's see what happens next. He also is making small lipid particles. So if you notice over here on this advanced lipid panel, he's making all the bad actor lipids. So all the cortisol and glucose and insulin is causing him to move down the road towards heart disease, even though he's normal weight. He's a chief wellness officer. He, meditates and does all the good stuff, or at least he used to. And then he also, because as your cortisol is disrupted and you're making a lot of glucose and insulin, you make more adrenaline, and that means your kidneys are getting less blood flow. So his creatinine is going up. So this is a guy who he's worked himself to the ground. His glucose has gone up, his lipids are going bad, and now his kidneys are taking the brunt of it. And then let's look at the next thing, his testosterone drop. So this particular study, cortisol, testosterone, and coronary artery disease, a perspective of evidence from the Carpilli study. So what this is basically showing, the way we modeled the metabolic code is we string together all this information like a set of pearls to kind of figure out where do you need to go first. So how did we string the pearls on this gentleman? His cortisol's off because of his HPA axis being, hyperaroused due to stress. His glucose is up, his MAG is up, his D is down, his homocysteine's up, his lipids are disordered, his lipoprotein little a, which is a big marker for aging, right? That's one of the biggest. And then his creatinine's up and his testosterone's down. So we've just strung all of this stuff together, but where do we start? To your point, we got to start with getting his stress response back. So how do you do that? It's different depending where people are at. I'm a big believer. I love box breathing for people. So if you start with non-medicinal things, box breathing, 3 to 4 minutes, 2 to 3 times a day, on your exhale, box breathing is 4 seconds in, hold 4 seconds, 4 seconds out, hold 4 seconds. On the exhale, you're thinking of, I'm going to get rid of the stress of the day, right? You're breathing out the stress. And then at the end of those 3 minutes or 4, you want to be grateful for something.
Oh, I love this. I heard you talk about box breathing, but I had never encountered that. And it's kind of crazy that I wouldn't have, because I'm so passionately involved in it. No other guest has ever mentioned box breathing. So where does that come from, and why do you know it works?
Well, when you breathe like that, you're creating a rhythmic breathing that drops the diaphragm and resets the parasympathetic nervous system. So it's different than meditation. It's an active exercise to reset parasympathetic tone, drop your diaphragm, and oxygenate your blood better. Because most people are shallow breathing, their carbon dioxide levels are elevated, their lactic acid's elevated, and so they don't really get good strong breaths. The other thing they can do is they can resort to using like the parasympathetic tone stimulators, the nerve stimulators that you can hold on on your nerve, and you can stimulate it to reset your nervous system. Another option if you got to go to the next level. And then of course, if you're somebody who is stressed and craving sweets and carbs, I'm stressed, and when I get home from work, I hug my potato chip bag before I open it up. Or I don't eat a cookie, I eat 3 cookies. And after the 3 cookies, I look at it and go, I really don't like partial rows. I'm going to eat a few more cookies, right? That means that you have comfort food cravings, and we need to reset your adenosine, serotonin, and serotonin receptors. I love Relora for that, Relora. It's a branded ingredient. I really like it. It works great. If you're a perseverator, what's that? Go ahead.
I'm going to ask you, just to stop you for a moment, what about, along with Relora, what about L-theanine and GABA?
Well, I was just going to get to theanine, because so Relora is specific for stress eating. Theanine is really good for people that perseverate. They're anxious and they perseverate. They're list makers. They can't stop getting off the stress wheel in their head, but they're not necessarily craving food. So theanine is basically an anti-glutamate agent. It blocks glutamate. GABA levels come up in your brain. Dopamine comes up in your brain. I like GABA. I love holy basil. I think all of them are great for taking if you're feeling stressed. If you have to get your cortisol curve up in the morning at noon. And if you're not anxious, I like using New Zealand adrenal cortex extracts. And I'll give those in the morning and I'll give those at noon to help boost that up, to repair the individual. And then once they're feeling better, I want to move them to more like an adaptogen. Rhodiola, cordyceps, schizandra. And why are these adaptogens so important? Well, what I learned in pharmacognosy back at the University of Cincinnati, because we had to take pharmacognosy, since the beginning of recorded medicine in all cultures, the most valuable herb in every culture has been an adaptogen. And think about that. So that means since we first started recording medicine, protecting the response to stress was the most valuable piece of that culture's medicine. What do we do, though? We have people run absolutely at breakneck speed until they break.
Yeah. And then they take Xanax.
And Xanax and Prozac, that's our adaptogens, right? Exactly. So we need to start thinking about keeping people strong and not just, hey, when you break, we got a Band-Aid to put on that bullet hole, right?
Well, it's that you're saying all this because we started this conversation by saying that the biggest killer is stress, and that this is the one thing that if we get that under control, the others are going to start to be a lot easier to manage. But if you don't get your stress first, then the rest of it is going to be almost impossible to change. So
you're exactly right. I mean, that's exactly it. I'll give you a good example. You know how many people do food allergy tests?
Yeah.
A lot of people do food allergy tests. I like them. I do ones that are advanced. They test 4 categories of reaction. But you'll work on you'll work on somebody's gut forever if you don't recognize if are they somebody that's stressed out, anxious, or have their cortisol curve disrupted. Because as soon as your cortisol's off, you release interleukin-6. Right. That goes to the enteric nervous system, and then the tight junctions of your gut break.
That is so fascinating. So you didn't mention ginseng. Do you include that as one of your adaptogens?
Oh, I love ginseng. In fact, we created an ginsenoside R3 nasal spray about a decade ago, where it's pure ginsenoside R3 from Meyer ginseng.
Mm-hmm.
And it's amazing for cognitive capacity and repair. We now have been able to put it in, and I do a lot of research and development on product delivery. Now it's in a chewable tablet, which is really exciting. That was called Synapsin. I love ginseng. I mean, you've got ashwagandha.
Right.
Obviously, it's got some value to it, but I'm a big fan of the ginseng family because the ginsenosides in Manchurian and Korean ginseng do fantastic things for our body. So I'm a big fan.
Okay, good. So I don't want to get stuck on the stress too long, so that we don't get to the other very important issues, which
Sure.
are part of the books that you've written. So okay, so
Let me finish this slide just to show you kind of how the metabolic code works. So the way this works,
that's what I want.
We know you're under stress.
Yeah.
We know you've got low testosterone. We know your blood sugar's up.
Yeah.
But where this is leading you is to triad 3. You're going to become a vasculopath, and it's going to lead you to heart disease. So what do we fix today? Are we worried about, hey, we got to get your lipids right? No, you got to go back here and fix the stress, fix the blood sugar, get the testosterone back, and eliminate that arrow to that future heart disease risk. So this is all about measuring how far are you away from your optimal health. It's not about diagnosing you with heart disease or diabetes. It's what systems of your body are unaligned. Then as we align them, are all these labs coming into line, regressing metabolic inflammation. So that's kind of the whole concept of metabolic code.
Now, this is really important. I'm so glad that you did this. And can you tell us on the metabolic code, you mentioned HPA. That's hypothalamus pituitary adrenal, correct?
That's right.
I want our viewers to know what that was, HPA. And then, Jim, is it always true that if your stress levels are compromised, that your testosterone will be low?
For the most part. So when free cortisol is high in your bloodstream, you inhibit gonadotropin releasing hormone. Yeah. So if you're a man, your testosterone goes down, and if you're a woman, your estradiol can go down.
Okay. Well, so yes. What about a woman's testosterone? Would that be affected?
That would go down too. We see a lot of women with low testosterone. The professional woman working hard, being a mom, participating in the church group. Being super women, right?
Right.
And, at the end of the day, if that testosterone drops, their sex drive goes down, their self-esteem goes down. As the hormones start to alter, they just, they lose a little bit of that zest for life because they're just working so hard for all these other facets of their body that they kind of leave their potency and their desire on the table.
Correct.
Right? It's the sacrifice, right? Which is unfortunate.
Yeah, and their sarcopenia, because their testosterone is low, their muscle mass is going to be lowered as well, and they can work out as much as they want, but they're still not going to build muscle if they don't have the hormones. So
that's right, and you see that even in figure competitors, because I work on figure competitors too, is that they're training really hard, they're dieting, they're just pushing their body to get to that competition, and then after the competition, it's hormone mayhem.
Yes.
And that's a big issue, right? Same thing for men. So same thing happens.
Can you multitask with the cures? Well, for example, while you're working on the cortisol and the stress levels to bring them back into alignment, can you also be recommending that the patient do injectable testosterone or troches, or in other words, it can be
whatever delivery system. Sure. Yeah. No, you can multitask. Absolutely. In fact, I think that the biggest challenge, and that's why we developed the code, was multitask, but don't give them a bag of 20 things to do.
That's exactly where I was going. Is how do you prevent overwhelm when there's so, like that gentleman, the wellness director, he had so many things to address. He could be, get just completely uh, frightened and run away. So how do you?
We gave him 6 things to do,
Oh, good. Okay.
and he came out of it fantastic. I mean,
Oh,
4 weeks later, he's like, I can't believe how much better I feel. We worked on his gut a little bit, his stress response. We gave him a botanical to kick his testosterone up because he was low, but he wasn't really bad. And, he did really well, supported his adrenals, got them coming on back on board. And that was it. I mean, I think that's the biggest challenge is, and look, I've been in this so long. I've seen what happens. People go to a seminar and now everybody that they see has whatever was presented at the seminar. That's what everybody's got.
yeah.
and it's trying to get away from that thought process
Right.
and get back to where is this person's chemistry moving in time, right?
Right. Well, I think if people use the metaphor of a pyramid and recognize, just like the food pyramid is supposed to help us to make good food choices, the pyramid, the metabolic pyramid, although you did it in little triangles, but the same idea that you have to build a foundation. I'm a developer by career background, so I understand the metaphor of building a house. So that you have to have a strong foundation before you can start putting up the walls and of course finally the roof. And so here you are, you're creating that strong foundation is getting your cortisol and your fight or flight stress response in order. And then from there, and because that affects so many other things, as you pointed out. I mean, it goes into the gut, it goes to the brain, and the gut and the brain axis. I mean, the whole thing is interrelated. This is the miracle of the body, I think. And I was telling one of my last guests about Dr. Sears, Barry Sears.
Yep.
You remember him? He was the first one. I was in a partnership with him. I was on his advisory board for some new business he was creating back about 15, 20 years ago. And he was the first one to bring up the term inflammation. And at the time, and you remember this because you've been doing this for 40 years, that term was not accepted. And people didn't know what they were, he was like a pariah at A4M even. He couldn't, it was the one place he could actually get his point across, he told me. But most of the other doctors thought he was crazy to talk about inflammation. If you remember, the whole zone diet was based on inflammation. So what you're talking about now that's very commonplace, I just wonder in 40 more years what's going to be the commonplace. What do you think will be the thing today that's kind of
avant-garde?
Yeah.
That's a really good question. I mean, I know back when I wrote the Cracking the Metabolic Code book, 2002, I was talking about inflammation and leaky gut, and I got absolutely ridiculed by conventional docs. Like, leaky gut.
You were right in the same school as Barry Sears.
There's cracks in your gut. Well, I just showed you that electron microscopy. There are cracks in the gut. The science caught up with it.
Yeah.
I think what's going to be one of the big evolutions is right now peptides are considered somewhat controversial, although insulin was the first peptide in 1923 to be released. So it's not that new, but I think we're going to think of peptides as just a natural part of what we do for our health over the next 40 years. Right now, it's like a little bit of a tug of war with FDA and what's going on with availability.
Right.
So I think that's going to be one, and I think we're going to get a deeper understanding of my colleague that's my chief medical officer, Dr. Andy Heyman, that talks a lot about the impact of mold and water damaged buildings and the internal environment that you live in. Has a dramatic effect on chronic inflammation in your body. I think there's so much we miss on where we live. Indoor air quality is huge, and I just think nobody deals with it.
Exactly. I have an air purifier, four of them I have a 4-bedroom home, and I have one in every bedroom, and even one in my office. So this is really important. I mean, it's something you have to watch, you have to make sure you change the filters, and, it's a responsibility,
It's
but
work.
and the same thing for water. You
Oh,
know, I find I have so many wealthy friends who do not invest in a water purification system, and this just shocks me. You have
I could not agree with you more. I
so,
mean,
so that would
it's
be another one I think in the future, because the water's not going to get better; it's only going to get worse, I think, and the air is only going to get worse as we've seen what's happened in the last 20 years with toxicity in our world and the pesticides and the herbicides and all the, you
oh,
know. So,
unbelievable.
and how do you feel? Let's segue to peptides, because that's an important subject, and I know you've written a book called Peptide Manual, right? The newest book,
Yeah.
and you have a book on the peptide bioregulators, which is something I'm very interested in, and I'm sure my viewers are if they know Dr. Bill Lawrence, who was on my show, and I'm on in his clinical trial. So I'm very interested in hearing what you have to say. So unfortunately, they just flashed me, and we only have 5 more minutes. So I want you to try to condense this. I know. Well, I know I'm going to have you back, so that's okay. We'll make this part one, and then we'll do part two. So
Awesome.
give us your 5 minute or less dissertation on peptide bioregulators and peptides, and why we should be looking at them as an alternative to improving our well-being.
Yeah, it's pretty simple. Peptides are compounds that our body produces to help us self-regulate, to help us heal from that inflammatory state to the healing and homeostasis state. And that means everything from regulation of the immune system to hormones, to how our mitochondria function, mitochondrial respiration, making energy, healing connective tissue and bone. We have all of these signal substances, peptides. Amino acids make up peptides.
Right.
A big enough string of peptides become a protein.
Right.
So peptides can be as small as like KPV is a peptide.
Right.
3 amino acids put together in a special way to help
Right.
your body manage TNF alpha.
Right.
Bioregulators are also basically peptides that you
Right.
get from, look, if you were into nutrition gland therapies, like 35, 40 years ago, I was using New Zealand gland extracts, aorta extract, liver extract, adrenal extract.
Mm-hmm.
They all contained these signal substances and and peptides that you would ingest, and then
Mm-hmm.
you would get the benefit of better health. So whether
Can you,
it's a bioregulator extracted from a natural compound or it is
or,
a synthesized
right.
peptide, they're
Right.
signaling our body to restore either homeostasis or to get us to reverse some of the aging processes that we're undergoing.
Right. So that brings up a good question. Do you feel that you have to inject, or can you take oral, or can you do a combination of both?
I think it depends on what your goal is. I know we've been working on a delivery system that we're pretty confident will deliver a lot of peptides orally. So I've already done trials with it. So I
Yeah.
do think that you can do it that way. I think you can deliver them through the skin, and I do think you can inject them. What I try to discourage people is don't inject 10 peptides 4 times a day.
Yeah.
Because it's that old story of whatever is worth doing is worth overdoing, and I just am not there with people. Hey, I'm going to take this. I'm going to take this. I'm going to inject them. Just look at the key things you need.
Right.
Some show oral availability, and I think that's great. Like we have a BPC that we've created in a liposomal tablet technology. We have a worldwide patent pending on all drugs and all nutrients. With a solid state liposome that keeps the particle size under 100 nanometers and is stable for 4 years, which is a big breakthrough because liquid liposomes are unstable. They agglomerate over time once you manufacture them.
Right.
So anyway, that's kind of I think it's you just want to feel, do I get an effect? I took something orally. Did I get an effect? Did I see a difference?
Well, the one question I had about the oral approach is that if the gut is in dysbiosis, and it's not, or we have leaky gut, as you've discussed today, would you ever get the benefit of these oral peptides if your gut isn't healthy?
Depends on the delivery. Once again, if you do it in a liposome solid state delivery, it goes through the micelles and it gets absorbed regardless. If it's just a regular capsule, probably reduced absorption.
Yeah, and just so people know, BPC 157 that Jim just referred to, that's the peptide that you can use orally. It comes from your gut, so it's actually better to do orally if you're trying to address issues with your gut. But if you're using it for joints and muscle and other injuries, it's probably better to inject it and right into the site where the trauma occurred. Is that how you would do it, Jim?
I used to say that, and I just had another case of a tennis elbow where they were injecting BPC. We had them use the liposomal BPC tablet with with a chewable liposomal curcumin, and I completely got them out of pain in about 5 days, whereas the injection wasn't working. But I'm a big fan of the injection. I've seen it work a bunch of times, but now the FDA has taken that away. It's a category 2.
Right.
So now you could use BPC as a dietary supplement as long as it's in its dietary supplement or natural form.
Okay.
So it's kind of made it a little bit different. The only people using it now are they're buying the stuff that's not for human use or research grade, and I don't really promote that. I just don't think that's, they don't have the same strictness.
So what is, because I don't want us to run out of time without doing 2 more things. One is to ask you, what would you consider your greatest achievement in your life thus far?
Raising my son.
I love that. I should have said professionally, but that's okay.
If I do it professionally, I would say that I won the Clinician of the Year for the Natural Products Association, the big group that does Expo, which for elevating the standards of integrative medicine across the U.S., and then being named Clinician of the Year for an Educator of the Year for A4M, and being kind of their I'm not an awards guy. I just work because I love what I do. Right. But those were nice achievements to be recognized, and I love being able to invent things, the new technologies that we work with. But I'd probably say those are the biggies. I mean, I would say all the patients I've helped heal, but that goes without saying.
But and I when I look at you and you say you're 64. I mean, I look at you and you're so I would never have guessed that, but I would have probably said 44. But the fact is, you've worked very hard to stay looking as vital as you do, and it's not only the appearance, it's your attitude and your energy. So I would, if somebody were asking me, what's the greatest achievement that Jim LaValle has had, and asking an outsider looking in, obviously I would say all the patients, of course, and all that. But the important thing that I see physically is that you've done what your goal is in life, which is to stay vital and live every day to its fullest, because you never know what.
That's right.
So
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Well, I never say anything I don't mean, so I really want you to know that's genuine. And the last question before we get to our wonderful gift that you're going to provide is who in your life has been the most inspirational? Who do you look at as a mentor?
My biggest mentor was Dr. Alexander Wood. He started the Ontario College of Naturopathic Medicine. He was a chiropractor, started the Ontario College, had a degree in psychology. He taught at Medicine Week in Baden-Baden. He was a founder of the Occidental Research Institute. And he really taught me how to look at the body in a systems biology approach way back in 1984. And he was very much ahead of his time, taught me a lot of Reckwitz theories and taught me homeopathy. I mean, he was just amazing. God rest his soul, he's passed, but he was my by far biggest influence.
And one last question. When have you made a mistake in your life that you regret, that you wish you could do over?
Wow. Um, I wish I had more confidence in myself earlier in my career, even though on the outside, with all the books published and everything else, it was I didn't feel I was good enough, and I was afraid to get out there and really share. And I
Yeah.
think that was a big mistake. So now I'm making up for it. I'm, doing social media and,
No,
having fun.
you're prolific, and you've helped so many people, not only patients, but people who are looking at you online and learning from you, and then taking that to their doctors, to challenge them or ask them questions. Okay, so before we go, why don't you tell everyone what wonderful gift you're going to give to our viewers today? Because we always love our guests to give something that they want, that they feel is valuable. So go ahead.
Well, we talked about bioregulators, and you were really interested. And I've got a nice little ebook on bioregulators that I can post up, and people can download it. So it's a nice, very nice ebook that I use in our Peptide Society training, actually. So it should be something that they'll enjoy.
So can we get a link on that so that our Alexis can put in our podcast when we post it?
Oh, absolutely. I'll have it sent to you. We'll get it taken care of.
All
Yep,
right.
absolutely.
All right, Jim. Well, part one was amazing, and thank you so much. And I want to just invite you back. It'll have to be next year because we're completely booked, but we will make this happen. And if that's good for you,
Absolutely.
yeah, by then you'll probably have written 5 more books, knowing you.
I have 2 more coming out. Yeah, I got 2 coming out. Yeah.
At least we have 2, and we didn't even get to Blood Never Lies, which is another one of your wonderful books that I read so enthusiastically, because most people know that when you get your blood results until you meet with your doctor, and sometimes that's very cursory. But many times you're just like, okay, what does this mean? And you just dissect all of the biomarkers of your blood work and make it so that it's easy and better to ask questions when you are in front of your doctor. So
Yeah.
thank you again for writing that book. All right, well, we'll say goodbye, and thank you again for a beautiful time together, and you take care.
Thank you so much.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.